For Team Silent of Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo, it made sense to follow up on Silent Hill. It was a financial hit and received immense critical acclaim. Development began in 1999, but when Silent Hill 2 released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, it offered a horror experience that's still unique to this day. Join us as we look back on the various aspects of this horror classic, further reinforcing how there's nothing quite like it. Beware though, spoilers abound. Storytelling. Environmental storytelling isn't a new concept by any means, but it's incredible how a title like this trusted its viewers to understand the story through observation and empathy. It starts with protagonist James Sunderland staring at himself in the mirror, contemplating, before we learn of him receiving a letter from his wife Mary. Mary is deceased, but apparently still waiting for James in their, quote, special place in Silent Hill. Thus begins one's journey into the decrepit town, which is slowly introduced with long stretches without any dialogue or narration. The player seeks to learn the truth, but every facet of the game presents this as a foregone conclusion. It's not until reaching the end that James's mannerisms, the strange holes in the walls, the enemies, and Maria's presence actually start to make sense. But traces of the truth can be observed throughout. Crime and punishment. Long story short, James killed his wife. It was a mercy killing, but also one born of frustration as James couldn't handle the stress caused by Mary being ill, in more ways than one. It's perhaps no surprise that Silent Hill 2 is about morality, with Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment serving as an inspiration. Whether James was justified in his actions or not, whether he deserves to be punished, and whether he's actually worthy of remorse is the main goal of the narrative, rather than just discovering the truth. It forces the player to really examine James and to come to their own conclusion regarding his character. Subverting expectations. In that way, Silent Hill 2 is brilliant for its ability to subvert expectations. It's fairly straightforward in its setup and seems to showcase James as an unfortunate person caught up in a town of supernatural horrors. He just wants to be reunited with his wife, who he thought to be dead, right? Well, as the game progresses, it becomes clear that Maria isn't just a dead ringer for Mary, and that these horrors aren't just there to stop the hero from completing his mission. Nothing plays out as you expect, and depending on your actions, the ending may be something entirely out of left field as well. Art direction and influences. As to the art direction, it still stands out with its ever-present fog enveloping the player wherever they go. The street's appearance strikes a balance, appearing destitute while also feeling imposing. The development team took inspiration from a variety of film directors, like Alfred Hitchcock, David Cronenberg, or David Lynch, and even manga artists like Junji Ito and Daijiro Moroshi. The sheer sense of dread is balanced with an environment that almost makes it feel like you're wandering through a dream. Before the nightmare sets in, that is. It's simultaneously ethereal, yet suffocating. Uncomfortable, yet endearing. Feeling weak. Older Resident Evil titles had tank controls and limited ammo to reinforce the atmosphere of survival horror, where running was often more beneficial than fighting. Silent Hill 2 goes ever so slightly further. While movement and combat are clunky, making it difficult to fight or escape, the game also throws foes like Pyramid Head at you that simply cannot be killed. Also, unlike Resident Evil, the crux of James's torment is something that can't be resolved by simply shooting it. It's not something that's laid to rest when you stop playing. Given the sheer sense of dread permeating the atmosphere, you're never quite sure what to expect or how to react at any given time. However, the game provides various other ways to discourage fighting while keeping you on your toes. The usage of fog. Though the PlayStation 2 had its limits, even back in the day, it's interesting how the developer used this to its advantage. This is best seen with the fog usage, which blankets areas and makes it difficult to predict just what could emerge from within. While this helped get around the limited draw distance, it also advised caution and a more methodical pace as opposed to simply running forward. The radio further reinforced this, as static would begin to play if any enemies were near. Of course, you didn't know their exact location, but it served the purpose of drawing players into the story's pace while making them think twice about fighting. Symbolism. Every aspect of Silent Hill 2 tells a small part of the greater truth about James's story and what he's done. Symbolism, however, lays apparent in everything in James's own personal hell. Beyond Pyramid Head being his instrument of punishment, Silent Hill itself is a manifestation of one's darker emotions and past trauma, twisted to torture them. Sometimes this is at the victim's behest, other times to force them to accept their guilt. Silent Hill 2 isn't too concerned about the town's lore, especially with regards to the cult from the first game, though Pyramid Head is based on executioners from its past. It's more of a mirror that peers into the depths of one's soul. Of course, the malicious nature of the town shouldn't be discounted, as it amplifies one's trauma to extreme lengths, and causes other people's horrors to be mixed together. Iconic horror designs. Trying to separate the inherent symbolism and emotions for each monster from the core plot is difficult. They represent James's darkest emotions, after all. Even when seeing Pyramid Head in subsequent titles, it's hard not to think back to his Silent Hill 2 incarnation. The monster designs are just that iconic. Pyramid Head with his giant cleaver and butcher robe. The abstract daddy, which is a frame mixed with two bodies in disturbing fashion. The bubblehead nurses and their twitching movements. Or the mannequin, which is just four legs joined together in a torso, and the list goes on. These horrifying designs have endured the test of time, and it's safe to say that very few horror games, even by today's standards, can compare. The soundtrack. Along with pretty much everything else from Silent Hill 2, there's nothing quite like its soundtrack. Composer Akira Yamaoka is responsible for the same, putting horror first and foremost, but also weaving in emotions like love. That duality can be seen in the theme of Laura, which took 3 days to create, as its sad tones contrast with the iconic guitar riffs. The use of silence, which added an entirely new dimension to the music, also reinforced the isolation and sadness that the players felt in-game. At the end of the day, Yamaoka is considered a legend, and Silent Hill 2 offers ample reason why. How the multiple endings are handled. Finally, we come to the endings. Having multiple endings in a game wasn't anything new at this point. Look at Resident Evil 1, which offered minor alterations, but still. But the endings are intriguing for not really bringing the overwhelming emotions of regret, anger, sadness, and pity to a close. One ending sees James committing suicide. Another has James leaving the town with Maria, who seems doomed to repeat the cycle of suffering, indicating that the former has learned nothing from his mistakes. Then there are the less serious endings, like a dog being behind all of the game's events, or a UFO that kidnaps James, with Silent Hill 1's Harry Mason working with the aliens no less. Why? Well, why not? It's the perfect mix of emotional involvement and sheer randomness that very few games can offer. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.